Hey guys, and welcome back to another Lost Bits video right here on TetraBitGaming, the series where we explore the unused, altered, and unseen content in gaming. When the studio that developed the first several Mario and Luigi games got shut down in 2019, I honestly didn't think we'd ever see another Mario and Luigi game again. But in late 2024 here, the series actually returns with Mario and Luigi Brothership on the Nintendo Switch. And with that game recently releasing, as I make this video, it's time to finally start covering the Mario and Luigi games here on Lost Bits. And of course, we gotta start with the first game that released way back in 2003 on the Game Boy Advance, Superstar Saga. There's a lot of unused stuff to go through for this game, from unused audio to an absolute boatload of unused graphics. So grab Luigi and chuck him on that like button below. It's time to hop into the Bean Kingdom and check out some Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga Lost Bits. Now, not too long ago from the making of this video, an early prototype build of the game was actually dumped online in October of 2023. But for this first video, I'll just be focusing on the final release version of the game, and if enough of you are interested, I'll cover the pre-release stuff in a future video. Anyways, let's first kick this video off with some unused enemies, or rather I guess it's better to say unused enemy variants, as although with different stat values, many of them do use graphics that are normally seen in the game. For instance, there are actually 3 unused enemies that all just use sprites of the Goombas. There's Dumb Monster, Get Me, as well as one still just called Goomba but with much different values. The numbers you see in parentheses here are the values of the Goomba normally used in the game. Then sharing identical stats to this unused Goomba variant is also Dumb Monster, and it's thought that its name derives from combining dummy and monster together, suggesting that this was an enemy type that the developers were using for testing. And then the last of these 3 Goomba variants is Get Me, whose cool name is only matched by its absolutely insane 5,000 HP and offering 999 XP to the player for defeating one. With crazy stats like those, this fella also seems like an enemy used by the developers for testing. Then, to add to the Goombas, there are also unused sprites for an animation of them seemingly jumping, likely meant for an attack, which was also scrapped. And we're actually not done with unused Goomba variants yet, as next there are leftover sprites for Paragoombas flapping their wings, flapping but faster, as well as for them taking damage, and apparently it's believed that these Paragoombas were scrapped in favor of the Para-Beanie enemies seen in the game. Then after this, it feels like I just talked about unused Goomba color variants not too long ago in my Super Princess Peach video, but yeah, we got 2 more unused ones here in Superstar Saga, with the red one referred to as a Pop Goomba and the blue one a Mossy Goomba. Both of these color variants all have the same sprites for the same animations that the regular Goombas have, and they also both share the same stats, making them quite weak compared to even the regular Goombas that are seen in the game. Then finally, after the Goombas, we have an unused enemy simply called Nice Guy, who just uses the sprites of a hooligan. Then, although seen in the game, there are stats for a few characters that never really get used since you either don't battle them, or they never actually attack or can't normally be defeated. For example, the Hammerhead brothers, Sledge and Mallet, actually both have 5,000 HP and a speed value of 100, and then Sergeant Starshade also has stat data, as well as an unused animation for getting dizzy. And these both seem to suggest that in the battle tutorial, there may have originally been some plans for the player to have battled against the Sarge instead of a fight or fly enemy. And then lastly, there's also unused battle data for the unique Bob-omb that's seen in the fights against Larry, Roy, and Wendy, including it having 5,000 HP, a whopping 999 defense, as well as the name Time Bob-omb, which isn't ever normally seen since you can't even target it during a battle. Then, although there aren't any sprites or data associated with them, there are also text strings for a few unused or normally unseen enemy names. And these include the unknown skeletal shark-finned enemy found in Guarhar Lagoon being referred to as Sharkbone, which, given its appearance, yeah, makes sense. And interestingly, despite never being seen in the original game, the name is seen in the official player's guide. Furthermore, in the German version of the game, the other question mark finned enemy is referred to as a sand cheap, which isn't ever shown in other regions. Then after this, there's also a string for a Champa enemy that's thought to be an alternate name for the Mecha Chomps. And then, although not enemies themselves I guess, there are unused alternate names for Hermie III's left and right claw, where they're referred to as pincers instead. Alright, next up, let's talk about some unused item data that's left over in the game. First here, there's unused text left over for obtaining 2 items that seem to have been scrapped from the game. There's a Spiritual Brothers item, as well as, actually, a Game & Watch. Now, it's unclear exactly what either of these 2 items would have been, as this text for getting them is all that's left. But Spiritual Brothers could be an early name for the Soulful Brothers badge, and then the text for the Game & Watch is found right after that of the Beanlet and Beanstone items. And this proximity could possibly suggest that this Game & Watch item was going to also be a key item. After this, there are several unobtainable equipment items that have a bunch of data left over for them, including their name, description, and effects. These items include Light Slacks, Heavy Slacks, Safeguard, and Oho Gear, which could be used by both Mario and Luigi. Then for just Mario, there's Chocola Pants, and then for just Luigi, we got Genie Jeans, and if those weren't enough, there's also Geniest Jeans as well. Now, I hope you like beans, cause next up we got several unused bean-type items that were scrapped. First, although in the game section where you have to feed the 7 hungry Yoshis, this purple bean fruit is seen, there are actually unused variants of the bean fruits in green, red, blue, yellow, orange, as well as azure, a color corresponding to each of the hungry Yoshis that you have to feed around the Yoshi Theater. And then there's also unused description text, as well as text for obtaining each of these colored bean fruits to boot. I think it's kinda strange that the decision ended up being made to just use the purple bean fruits in the final cut, considering that these are all still left over here. Then to add to this, there are also several unused text strings for colored neon beans in the same set of colors. And despite having a different description, it's very likely that these are just early names for the bean fruits, especially considering that the goal is for the player to get the hungry Yoshis to lay neon eggs. Now next up, probably my favorite bit of unused content trivia for Superstar Saga is that before it was changed to just Professor Egad showing up every time in the Starbeans Cafe when making a new drink, originally there were once plans for various different Nintendo characters to have shown up instead. And there's actually a whole bunch of other unused assets associated with these characters that's still found left over in the game. Now these unused cameo appearances include one for Fox McCloud from the Star Fox series, Captain Olimar from Pikmin, the Racer from NES's Excitebike, Link from the Legend of Zelda series, Wario, and even Samus from the Metroid series. For Samus, she would have apparently appeared after making a Hulumbian drink. There was apparently going to be a power outage of some sort at the cafe, and the cashier would note that Samus's energy tanks are empty. Interestingly enough, there is still a power outage in one of the EGAD scenes that is used in the final game, so perhaps this Samus one was reworked into that one. After that, we also have several scrapped animations for Samus, including her teleporting in, walking, taking a sip, transitioning to the Morph Ball form, and although the interaction seems to have been pretty tame based on the leftover text, there are also animations for Samus blasting away and dropping Morph Ball bombs. Though based on the leftover interaction text, it's unclear what the targets could have been. Then next, we got Link, who would have appeared for the Teehee Espresso, where the cashier was just going to yap various references to the Zelda series. As far as unused sprites and animations go, we have Link walking, getting his drink in the iconic Link item pose, drinking it, and then similar to the Samus attack animations, we have some for Link slashing his sword, doing a spin attack, as well as fainting. Also, in each of these animations, you might have noticed the small Japanese bit of text above Link. And this Japanese kari is no stranger to appearing on Lost Bits here, as it's typically found on placeholder graphics, and it translates to temporary. After Link is Olimar from the Pikmin series, who, had he not been cut, would have made his 2D debut in this game after appearing for the Hee Hee blend. Olimar's interaction appears to have been one of the longer ones, and it would have had him monologuing his thoughts about finding the cafe, as well as apparently seeing Mario, who he would have dubbed Marlio. You would also notice a strange, unsightly green creature standing next to Mario, Luigi of course, and then he would have actually attacked Luigi by throwing a blue Pikmin at him, and there's animations left over of him doing so, as well as Luigi getting attacked by the Pikmin, which is honestly pretty funny. Then we also have unused animations of Olimar walking, taking a sip through his helmet, as well as animations for a herd of Pikmin and an idle animation, as well as what looks to be a walking animation for following Olimar. I believe Olimar has always been a sort of loose reference to Mario, with his name almost being an anagram of Mario, and this time here, Marlio is an anagram of Olimar, so it's cool to see this reference, just a shame this ended up getting cut from the game. Then next, we got Wario himself, who would have seemingly broken the fourth wall and would have proclaimed the game finally getting good with his appearance for making the Hoo Hoo blend. There would then be a bit about Wario paying off his tab, asking for free drinks, and then hating his drinks, so much so that it made him want to shave his tongue. And yeah, we again have animations of Wario walking, picking his nose, seemingly shocked at the mention of his unpaid tab, laughing at perhaps getting a free drink, drinking it, and then, reacting to how it tasted and made him feel. Then next, there's the racer from Excitebike, who would have appeared for the Chuckachino, and this interaction would have been pretty short, with the racer not having any dialogue at all seemingly. For the racer, we got animations for driving, an idle animation, drinking, doing a wheelie, and then I don't know where they'd jump off of, but there's also animations for the racer doing a flip, as well as seemingly crashing and falling off the bike. And then lastly, my favorite from the bunch, for Fox, we have again sprites for a walking animation as well as taking a drink. And in this scene, Fox was actually going to receive a distress call from looks like either Slippy or Peppy, as there are sprites for their portrait icons appearing in a traditional Star Fox style. And after all of those cameo appearances, before I guess Egad was chosen to be the character that would remain for all the instances, originally, it looks like he was assigned to have only appeared for the Woohoo blend drink after his sniffer would detect the aroma of the new juice. And of course, there's also some more text for his original planned interaction before he'd give the player the Game Boy Horror. And although the items you do still end up getting from Egad in the game aren't very subtle with them being references to other Nintendo games, it looks as if a few of their names actually also got altered to seemingly try to hide the reference a little bit more. The Cobalt necktie was a UV lamp, the Power Grip was originally Samus's energy tank, the Great Force was straight up just the Triforce, the bonus ring was originally called a gold ring, and then the greed wallet was originally straight up called Wario's Gold. Also, the Game Boy Horror that Egad gives the player originally wasn't an SP model, so it's kinda cool to see that this was seemingly updated to feature the Game Boy Advance SP, which at the time was only released a few months before this game. And while we're talking about the prof here, there are also a trio of sound effects and some animations meant for him left over in the game that ended up going unused as well. These include him saying both of the Mario Brothers names,
Mario Luigi,
as well as an unused alternate version of his general babbling sound effect.
Gimme apple,
And I don't know about you guys, but to me, it sounds like he's saying, gimme apple.
gimme apple.
Then for the unused animation side of things, we got him walking facing the player, and although he does walk in the game, it's very rarely in this direction, and when he does move in this direction, he kinda just awkwardly slides. And after this, we have another walking animation in this same direction, but with him donning his ghost robes, and the animation of him walking to the right in this outfit also isn't ever normally seen. Anyways, overall, I think all of these cameo appearances would have been really cool to see in the game, and it seems like there was a decent amount of work done to implement these, so I think it's a real shame that these ended up getting the snips. And the scrapped EGAD sound effects aren't the only bits of audio that go unused in Superstar Saga, as there's actually quite a few more tracks that are normally unheard. First up, we have a rather creepy sounding unused track, which based on how it sounds, is believed to perhaps have been meant for the Woohoo University. Then we have a track that sounds sort of similar to the music heard in Little Fungi Town. And this track was actually heard, seemingly as a placeholder, in the E3 2003 demo version of the game, as well as in an old trailer. Then we actually have not one, but two different tracks which are both rearranged versions of the title theme from Tomato Adventure, another game developed by the developers of Superstar Saga that was released exclusively in Japan. And being their first game developed on the Game Boy Advance, I guess perhaps these were used in this game in some sort of placeholder capacity. But in any case, the tracks slap pretty hard. Here's a quick sample of both. And then lastly, for the unused audio, we have several variants of a few tracks heard in the game which are believed to maybe have been early versions of each. So as we go through them here, I'll compare little snippets of the version that is used with the ones that go unused. We got an alternate version of the file select menu, there's a seemingly early version of the Teehee Valley theme, lacking the lead instrument, the bass line, and it's quite a bit faster. There's an alternate version of the battle theme. And then we also got a different version of the Hoo Hoo Village and Bean Bean Castletown theme, again lacking the lead instrument. Now next up, we've already gone over several unused sprites and animations with the unused enemies and the cameos, but there are a whole bunch more to go. For starters though, although not unused, there are entire chunks of the battle background graphics which are normally never seen since the battles only take place in a smaller chunk of an otherwise much wider area. Like an entire half of the backgrounds aren't normally ever seen. So yeah, full graphics of basically all of the battle backgrounds exist, and for the most part, they don't hide anything that interesting on the normally unseen right side here, but there are waterfalls in this background, as well as this one, that of course aren't normally seen in full like this. Now the background used for the game's final battle does scroll a bit, so it's believed that the intention might have been for the other backgrounds to scroll too, hence why they're so much bigger than what's normally seen. Also amongst these background graphics are a few that go unused since battle encounters never take place in the associated areas. And these include these two areas from the Woohoo University, as well as this area that just appears as a green grid. Which, yeah, unlike the other two backgrounds, this one looks to have been meant to be used for testing purposes or a template of some sort. Then, similarly to the parts of the battle backgrounds that aren't seen, the full graphic for the Chocola Bounce minigame also extends beyond what's normally seen, and as such, these statues in the corners here aren't visible. Then after these backgrounds, we got various unused sprites, some for also unused animations for a whole ton of the game's characters. Now there's lots to go through here, so I won't spend all too much time on each of them, but to start, for more of the game's enemies and bosses, we got an unused, slightly different sprite for Lemmy that looks to have been meant for an animation of his hair moving that in turn goes unused. Then for Larry, instead of his tennis racket just disappearing as it does in the final game, there's an unused animation of it actually like exploding and vanishing. And then there's also this unused sprite for his state of panic after he loses his racket, with his opposite eye enlarged compared to how it's normally seen in the game. And based on this, it's possible that the original idea was for these two sprites to be used for an animation like this. For the big man himself, there's an unused animation of Bowser crying. For Fawful, there's an unused animation of him running towards the brothers for a proper ramming attack. We got unused sprites of him in his stage getup walking downwards, as well as this sprite of him walking up, which isn't seen in the game as he moves too fast. Then there's an unused animation of him laughing, as well as an early version of him laying on the ground after getting attacked in Woohoo University. Then we got an unused sprite of Popple jumping, a frame from the animation of Birdo walking upwards that isn't seen in the game since she's only seen walking upwards for like a split second, and then also for Birdo is this animation of her crying, which was probably meant for the end of the battle against her and Popple, as a frame from this animation is used there, so it's kinda weird that the entire animation isn't. Then for Cacletta, there's an unused animation of her panicking while facing upwards, as well as an animation of her walking downwards, something she's never seen doing in the final game. And similarly for Bowletta, there are unused animations of her walking both down as well as upwards. Then next, we got some unused overworld sprites of the bloopers where they'd be obscured by these two different ink blobs. Similar to the Goomba attack I mentioned earlier, there are also unused sprites for a jumping attack for the Beanies. There's an unused animation of the Hammer Brothers walking, as well as leftover sprites for a scrapped, beanified version of them. We got some early overworld sprites of Wiggler where they appear much more basic compared to the final version, and furthermore, as you can see, here the Wiggler can be seen happy, which they're never seen being in the final game. Then there's a complete set of alternate sprites for the Bill Blaster, as well as the bullet bills that they shoot out. The obvious main difference with the unused version is that it has a much longer base compared to the final one, and also has the iconic skull on it, which is more often than not seen on its design throughout the series. And then the bullet bills are seen in a different color here as well, being gold instead of the regular dark gray. Next, among the sprites for the Piranha Plant, there's this unused sprite that appears to have been meant for perhaps some sort of projectile attack. And then there's also this graphic featuring 6 differently colored pest nut enemies. And due to all the different colors being seen here, it's likely that this was a color test of some sort, and ultimately, out of all of these, only the top right color was chosen. Then, after all of those enemies, other unused NPC graphics include an animation of both Thunderhand and Firebrand raising an arm, seemingly in anger. We got Jojora facing to the right in an idle pose but without her wand. We got an unused animation of Harhal stroking his chin while facing downwards. There's an unused animation of Mary floating facing to the right. Then similarly, there are unused animations of both Bubbles as well as Queen Bean walking to the right. Honestly, kinda surprised this design even made it into a Mario game in general. Then we have an unused animation of this Bean Bean Castle resident laughing, a Bean Bean airport flight attendant walking downwards. There's an unused version of Bottle's assistant in a different color palette rocking some brown hair and purple jacket instead of blonde hair and a blue jacket. And interestingly, in the 3DS remake of this game, the unused color palette ended up getting used instead. Then next, there's an unused early design of Lady Lima, with her being thinner, taller, and having a smaller and much less bouncy nose. Then we got a few unused animations for specifically the green Oho-G at the Oho Ocean surfing minigame, and these include the green one freaking out, spinning, and then twitching on the ground, as is seen by the purple one when you beat the game in under 38 seconds. Then for Toadsworth, we have an unused version of his panicking animation facing upwards, and similarly, there are unused animations of him being big mad, both facing upwards and downwards. And then on the other end of the emotion spectrum, we have two unused animations of a regular Toad being about as happy as I've ever seen them. After those Toads, we also have various unused sprites for the Starshade brothers. For the General, there's an unused high jump sprite, as well as him holding his arms up in a few different directions. Then for the Sergeant, his unused animations include him spinning, bowing, and then there are two sprites for his sideways walking animation that aren't ever seen. And then for both of the bros, there are unused animations of them walking upwards as well. Then, after all of those, there are also several unused NPC sprites which appear to be remnants from the early E3 build of the game. Now, these include sprites for an unused cloaked Bean Bean NPC, and this NPC could be seen as a side quest character in the E3 demo. Then we have overworld flying sprites for a scrapped Dawn Fly enemy. We got some unused parts of the laser snippet's head that, when placed over the graphics that are used in the game, it appears to show that these guys would have looked quite a bit different. And although still different than how they are seen in the E3 demo, these leftover parts in the final game definitely seem to be closer to the blue-eyed demo design. Then there's this sprite of a Bean Bean Castle resident looking down, which can be seen in the demo but not in the final game. Then, although sidesteppers appear in the background of the fight against Hermie III, there's also an unused sprite of them seemingly getting damaged, suggesting that they might have been enemies that could be encountered and damaged in a battle. Then, after all of those NPCs, we of course also have some unused graphics for the titular brothers as well. For Mario, there's an unused sprite of him slightly looking to the left while relaxing in the Jellyfish Sisters relaxation room. There's an unused sprite for the animation that is used in the game between paddling and surfing in the surfing minigame. And then, also for that minigame, there are unused animations of Mario balancing on the surfboard in a multitude of directions which aren't seen in the game. Then we got animations of Mario seemingly riding on something, pushing something diagonally, crying a whole bunch, getting pumped with water facing downwards, which never gets used as the water sources in the game always have Mario facing up or sideways. And speaking of pumping, there's also this unused animation of Mario pumping facing towards the player, as well as Luigi's associated animation facing away, which never get used as you only ever end surfing on the sides of a beach area. Then there are various sprites for Mario in his mini form, seemingly panicking. We got an unused alternate animation of Mario burning himself when getting the Firebrand in the game. We got Big Mario, as well as all of these animations of Mario stretching and squashing. And then there's this set of unused sprites for Mario ramming into a wall associated with the dashing fire tickle move. Since this move can only be performed with Luigi in front, I guess Mario just never ends up slamming into a wall like Luigi does. Then moving on to the Green Brother, similarly, there are also some unused sprites for Luigi slamming into a wall after dashing. And since the player can't ever ram into a wall diagonally, these diagonal facing sprites aren't ever used in the final game. Also for Luigi, we have an unused animation of him laughing, as well as different directional versions of Luigi being flustered, which go unused, as only the upward-facing one is seen in the game. Then for both of the brothers, we have unused animations of the two floating in a battle, making some sort of delighted pose, as well as the two squatting down, seemingly in pain. And just like the NPCs, there are also a couple of animations left over in the final cut here, which appear to be leftovers from the E3 demo build. These include two animations of Mario laying down sick after contracting bean fever, one seemingly munching on the crabby grass that heals him, and then another animation of him being cured with the green in his face progressively subsiding. In the final version, Mario kinda just absorbs the crabby grass and then glows into getting healthy instead. Then we got these early animations of the brothers obtaining the hand powers, and after those, there's a set of animations for Mario and Luigi from a scrapped cutscene with the Jellyfish Sisters, which is seen in the E3 demo build, but these are still left over in the final game here. And these are of Mario actually smacking the shit out of Luigi, as well as an accompanying heart animation that would have been for Luigi being infatuated with Mary. Then, in addition to all of those unused graphics for the characters, there's also some more for various items, the overworld maps, some for the user interface, and more. For the UI, we got early ability icons that are seen during overworld gameplay, and in this sheet, we can see that not only are the bubbles themselves smaller, but to accompany this smaller size, the actual icons for the arrow, hammer, and hand were much smaller too. And as you can see, the open hand used to be a closed fist. Then there's two unused color variants of the red first badge that you receive in the game, one blue and one yellow one. Then we have a sprite spelling out Mario with a star at the end, and due to the lack of any shading, they look pretty basic, and I reckon these might have been placeholders for something. And then, found alongside this Mario Star sprite, is also this one, featuring 8 triangles, each with a set of differently colored dots, with the last one here having the dots transparent. Then for the unused item graphics, we have this diploma sprite, which may have been something obtained at the Woohoo University. We got early sprites for coins, including for red and blue coins, which aren't ever seen in the final cut. And then there's also this small key. After those, we have a bunch of graphics for the game's overworld that go unused too, including this brown button object, these wooden beams thought to be for an earlier design of the Woohoo University. Then we got some unused water tiles, there are sprites for an unused animation of the doors in Bean Bean Castle opening up, and for this same door, there's also this unused version of it with a big ol' grin, instead of its regular expression. And speaking of doors, there's also this unused animation for the doors to the Gafawa ruins opening in their early design as they're seen in the E3 demo. And lastly for the doors, there's also this really basic looking placeholder graphic of the doors seen in Joke's End. Then also for the ruins, we got these unused statue things that were meant to be seen there. And interestingly, they are seen there in the E3 build, but in a different style, notably blue in color and lacking the more happy-looking eyes in this updated version. Then we got these spiked piston things found in the tile set for Bowser's Castle, some flowers, there's this unused patch of crabby grass, this X that's a leftover from the E3 demo as it's found on a rock in Oho Ocean. Also left over from the E3 version, there's this entrance to the SS Chocola Captain's storage room, which squished Mini Mario could have entered. We got these flaming statues, as well as them getting extinguished, that are seen in the Woohoo University generator room in the E3 build. There's an unused sprite of a closed book from a Yoshi cutscene that was cut from the game. We got unused sprites for this Paratroopa meant to have been seen in the game's credits. Although only piranha plants end up being seen on the sides in the final version of the Star Stash Smash minigame, there are also unused sprites for both a Goomba as well as a Chain Chomp, which would have been pretty cool to see there. Then for the Minecart minigame, there are unused sprites of some Cheep, a Skull, closed eye sprites of the Thwomp Thing seen in the minigame, as well as an unused frame meant for a flashing animation for the minigame's gem threshold counter that's seen at the end of each section. Then, probably the creepiest unused sprite of the bunch is this green thing, as well as this similar sprite lacking a few tiles. And these were apparently meant to have been seen in the castle's front entrance as well as in the garden. Certainly wouldn't be my first pick for a choice of decor. And then lastly, for the unused graphics, we have this. And this graphic actually uses sprites from the NES game Working Crew. It's not clear what exactly the purpose for this was planned to be or why this is left over here, but perhaps it would have been used as part of some sort of little Easter egg to one of Mario and Luigi's earliest games together. Whew, that was a lot of unused graphics to go through, but worry not if your unused graphics hunger is still not satisfied. There are plenty more early graphics to go over found in the E3 build that I'll cover in a future video. So, if you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know I love me my unused maps and debug features. So now, last up for this video, I'm happy to share that Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga has its fair share of both of those things. First, the unused rooms, and the first of these is an unused room from the seabed area, and this appears to be a near duplicate version of an area that is in the game, but here we have some graphical differences in the form of some glitched out tiles that can be seen here near where you spawn into the map. This archway is messed up, the map on the wall is missing here, and then there are a few more messed up tiles here and there. Now interestingly, there are still some active enemies in this room, unlike in the rest of the unused areas, including some Goom Divers, Bloopers, and a Starkiss enemy. Also, you can't leave this area through the bottom left section near the arch here, and although you can exit this area on the top right side of it, it will just seemingly respawn you into the same map back in the top left. And at first, I thought I was stuck in the wall or something, but if you swim straight to the right, you'll actually drop back into the map, this time with Luigi in tow. And interestingly, after loading in the second time here, I actually noticed that the blooper in this area is using the unused ink animations that I went over earlier. It seems pretty buggy, and after a while, the blooper will just completely dip out, but I thought it was still pretty cool to see here. Then next, we got this unused room from the Stardust Fields area. It's pretty small, so there's not too much to it here, but if you exit to the left, you'll actually end up at the left exit of the Border Brothers castle, and then exiting to the right of this room starts up the cutscene for first arriving in this area just to the right of the Border Bros castle. So just based on this positioning, it seems to perhaps have been an early version of the area where the castle was eventually added. And then lastly, for the unused rooms, there are actually several slightly different versions of the same test map, which takes place in this grassy plain-like area. For all of these, there are several objects seemingly used for testing changing elevation, such as some basic elevated areas, some ramps like this one shaped like an arrow, as well as this ramp that's also accompanied by some steps, and then there's this section in the top left where there are two little bridges that you can cross. Then also for all the different versions of this test map, we got these tiles with red circles on them, and then a bunch of these basic looking blue objects that come in a variety of shapes and sizes. These include this cage looking thing, this fence found beside a door with what looks to be some sort of placeholder for a keyhole or something, as there's a key-like tile just below it. And then there are several of these blue blocks, most of them with BG1 or 2 written on them, I'm assuming indicating which background layer they are on. Oh, also, there's this 0.5 block that in one of the maps, if you jump up to it from below, it seems to raise Mario's elevation in the area, and doing this basically messes up your position in this map completely, so I don't think this is intentional. Anyways, those are the objects that are the same across the board for all iterations of this test map. But moving on, the first version of this map we're going over here also adds 6 of these little blue posts here, these rather large ramps in the bottom right, which you can't even use here, so that's great. And yeah, for whatever reason, you actually can't use any of the ramps in this first version of the map, as they're blocked off by some invisible collision. In any case though, in the top left area, Popple can also actually be seen. And although the prompt to chat with him does show up, you can't actually interact with him at all. So I'm not quite sure what the purpose of his placement is here. Also, although you normally spawn in as just Mario into this map, you can actually exit this first area by going to the top left of the map, and then you'll load in a second version of this test map, and Luigi will end up joining you. Then, this second version of this area is also actually a bit different, in it adding not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 Popples here, just as non-interactable as the one previous. We got these elevated platforms with the red circles on them. There's an extra blue BG1 block here, this time on the right side of the area. And then, in the bottom left, instead of the blue posts seen in the previous map, there's now this tile that seems to have Pry Use 2 or Use N written on it. And no, I have no clue what that means, and it doesn't look to have any sort of functionality here at all. Then also added in the second area is this beanie enemy here that when touched actually starts up a battle, but oddly not against a beanie, but a basic Goomba instead. And you have to get your timing right on your attacks to end the battle here, otherwise if the Goomba ends up having a chance to try and attack you, after a halt, press the A button here, message pops up, the game will actually end up crashing. There's also another weird exit point, if you want to call it that here, that's both on the top of this ramp area as well as just below it. And each will warp you back to seemingly the opposite elevation in the previous version of this map. So it's all good if you take the top exit, but if you take the bottom one to go back to the top, you'll actually end up getting stuck there. Well, mostly, as you can kinda jump out and stuff, but yeah, you're basically soft locked at this point. Anyways, that's about it for this iteration, so onwards to the next one. And this one has the same layout as the previous one, only this time lacking all of the Popples and the beanie, and instead, all that's really different here is the addition of this back-facing blue virus, as well as this Anubu. Touching the blue virus will take the player to a fight in Princess Peach's throne room against a blue and red virus, as well as an Eker. And then touching the Anubu will lead to a fight against either 2 Anubus, 2 with a gritty Goomba, or a single one with a pair of spiky Sniffets, also all in the throne room. Then after this one, the next version of this room actually removes that one ramp with the adjacent steps, as well as this BG1 block, and in their stead, we have 2 new blue blocks here, as well as these bike paths. As such, I think it's quite obvious that this room was used as an area to test their functionality, but unfortunately, I couldn't find a way to get up there to actually do so myself. And then, saving the least interesting 2 versions of this test room for last, they both just share the layout of the second room we covered, just with no Popples or the beanie. And then one of these also just has some wonky collision near the bridge sections here, and that's about it. Yeah, nothing too wild with these last 2. But these last 2 aside, I'm happy we got to see some pretty cool test rooms with the other ones. And I don't know what it is, but there's just something special about test rooms found in GBA games that I love to see. And then last up for this video, in addition to all of those unused maps, there's one more that actually loads into a cutscene debug menu that takes the appearance of the Bean Blend machine found in Starbean's Cafe. The menu is pretty simple here. For each of the columns, there's a number you can select, with each one bringing you to a different cutscene or area throughout the game. The first one goes from 0 to 80, then 0 through 40, 0 to 20, and then the last one only goes up to 15. And not all the numbers even work, as often the last bunch in each option just cause the game to softlock. In fact, only one of the numbers in the third column seems to work at all, and it just loads you into an area of Bean Bean Castletown. Now, for the most part, this menu can be quite useful for getting around to different areas and parts of the game quickly, which is awesome if you want to replay a section or rewatch a cutscene without having to play through the entire game. I just wish there was some sort of indicator of what each number corresponded to, and even the number order doesn't necessarily correspond to the events in the game chronologically, so you kinda just have to test around. Furthermore, sometimes you'll load into an area, and then the game will end up soft locking, like here, Luigi just slides off to the right and the game locks up. Or if you switch the brothers around, yeah, sometimes the game doesn't like that either, probably since this is a section of the game where you're supposed to be here alone as Luigi. But in any case, in addition to just seeing some cutscenes, there are some options on this menu that lead to some more instances the devs used for testing. For instance, number 7 on the far right column brings you to the camera guy near Bean Bean Castle, and you'll actually be given a bunch of coins, so the devs probably used this to test the functionality of the camera guy interaction. And then number 11 on the same column brings the player just outside of Starbean's Cafe, and this time with 99 beans in each variety. So this was very likely used by the developers to test the blend machine, as well as all of the EGAD interactions that result from each blend. So yeah, overall, a pretty slick little debug menu left over in this game, but it's certainly not without some room for improvement. And that's about it for Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, at least for now. Like I said throughout the video, I'll be covering the pre-release and demo build of the game in a future video, so stay tuned for that. Also, big shoutouts to you if you made it to the end of this video. I normally would have split this into 2 parts, but I wanted to test out making an extra long video and seeing how it goes. I think this might end up being the longest Lost Bits video to date. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, check out some of my other Lost Bits, and be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell to find your way back to the channel in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for stopping by today, and I will see you in a bit.